Hello everyone, welcome to today's class. Today's class is simply the continuation of what we did yesterday. So, how many of us has the zip folder now? That folder that has the code base. I'm sure everyone has it. That's been shared with all of us. Please confirm in the chat session if you all have it now. Kindly confirm if you all have that folder that was shared with you. Great, thank you, Ezekiel. For those who don't have it, it has been shared with you. Thank you, Gideon. Gideon has it as well. It was shared in the group. Kindly check it. Can I have the response of those who have it so we can know? It's a zip folder which you're supposed to download. Great. Great. Awesome. Awesome. Kindly, please confirm that you have unzipped the folder and you have access to it in your Visual Studio Code. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to unzip it and open the folder in your Visual Studio Code. We all remember how to open the folder. We go to File, Open Folder, and then you click on wherever the folder is, that folder that you have unzipped, and then voila, you open it here. For those who don't have it, please check the WhatsApp group and get the link. Awesome. Thank you, Ezekiel. Ezekiel has access to it on Visual Studio. Let's see if we have 10 more people who have access to it. How many of you have opened it on your VS Code like I have? Okay, awesome. Thank you, Wale. Great, great. Gideon is ready for today's class. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna give us extra 2 minutes for those who don't have the link. to get the link and unzip the folder, and then open their VS Code. And open the folder from the VS Code. I can see some people have opened it already on their VS Code. That is good. For those who are just joining, we are going to be working on a basic API use. So there has been a folder that has been shared, a zip folder, which you can unzip and open from your VS Code. And that is a prerequisite for today's class. Okay. Now, for those who have opened the folder, you should have something like this on your screen. Kindly confirm you have something like this on your screen as well. You have those folders here, the dist folder, the quotes, and the SRC. Awesome. I can see some people now have this same view on their screen. Today we are going to be going through each folder and the code base itself, how to write it, the steps we took, and you followed through as well. Great. I can see in the chat that Wale now has a view. Very good, very good. Okay, so when you have your folder, the first thing you do is you install your node modules. And the best way to do it is to create a new terminal on your plus icon right here, new terminal. It will show this folder, this current folder here. Be sure that it is the same folder you have on your left hand side. And then you run npm install. Because I already have it, I don't need to install it again. But when you type npm install, just click enter. For the purpose of those who are just joining, I am going to check the list of the things that are in my folder, and I can easily remove my node module and install it again. You don't have to do that because you don't have it here. I have removed it, and you can see that it is no longer on the left pane. What I can do now is now to run the npm install, and then this is what I get. Please confirm you have all installed it now so we can proceed. Kindly confirm that you have all installed it now so we can proceed. I'm going to give us another 1 minute to have that response. I would advise you join from your phone or another device where you can respond so it's easier for you. What we just did is to do npm install. Okay. While you're doing that, let us have a look at the node modules. You see that we have the bin folder, the types, the TypeScript. All these modules are just there and they are comprised. They are the modules that are needed for this application to run. And it's always automatically created once you run your npm install. Now, once you have your folder, the first thing you want to do is to check your README file. This README is a markdown file that always has the details of what you are supposed to know concerning that application. Please confirm that you have all opened your README file on your VS Studio Code so we can go through it together. Very good. Thank you. I can see some people have opened it now. So you can see that in that README, it gave a simple explanation of what this app is all about. And it's a daily quote API. Okay. It is built in TypeScript and Node.js. And it has some HTTP modules. Remember the modules that you were taught, the verbs that you were taught in your previous class, the get, the post, the put, and the delete. If you can't see my screen, that is why you have it on your system. So for those who can't see my screen on the chat session, I'm expecting you to look at your own screen, your Visual Studio Code. Look at your readme.md file. I'll be telling you the screen we are working on so you can follow through as well. All right. Now, what are the features of this API. It has the full CRUD operation, which is you can create code, you can read, you can update, and you can delete. And it supports all HTTP verbs like get, post, put, and delete. The get will get all the quotes, the post will create, the put will update, and the delete will what? Delete. Now, because this is a JSON file-based storage, we don't need a database. And this JSON file is found in the quote. You can see quote.json on the left pane. We don't need authentication as well. And because this is like for educational purposes, there are so many comments on it to explain explicitly what each line means. We also follow the functional programming paradigm. Right. And we did not use classes or stateless objects. Okay. Now, if you go on to line 16 of the README file, you will see that we have the API endpoints. So these endpoints are what we are going to use. Okay. Now, for the get endpoints, we have get quotes / random, get clothes by ID, create in, then for the posts, we have create a new quote. We have the put functionality to update the quote based on that particular ID that we have provided. And we can delete a quote also based on the ID that we provide. Now, this is the project structure. We have the dist folder, which is the compiled JavaScript files. You don't have to worry about that. And then we have the quotes. That quote folder is created so we can put everything relating to the quote under it. So it's serving like our storage for this application where we have the quote.json file. And that one contains the quote data that we are going to be reaching out and working with. Then we have the SRC folder. That's like where the whole source code is. So if you check any application, most times the main code is always in the SRC folder. Okay. Now, in this SRC folder, we can see that we have the index.txt file. I'm going to open the folder so we'll be following along. The index.txt file, the server.txt file, which handles the server requests. Index, as the word is like the entry point. The file handler, which handles the input and output operations. And then the types, which handles the interface. I'm sure in your TypeScript guys remember the interface we talked about. Okay, this git ignore file is mostly for when you push to git, and there are some files you would not want to put for the public to see. All right, or make it cumbersome. Most times your node modules folder will always be in the git ignore file, because you will always install a new one when you open the app. So it's best to add it to your git ignore file and not push it to your repository. Okay, then we have the TypeScript config.json file. That's like very important for the TypeScript configuration. And then we have the README, which is this documentation that we're looking at, the project documentation. Okay, now let's take a look at each one of these folders, the code.json. Realize that this is a JSON file of an object in an array. This is the ID1, which has the ID, the text, the author, and the tag. So each object has its own ID, which is unique, and that is what we will be calling when we are running the get/id endpoint. And this is the second object, which are all in an array. You can always try to minimize like this if you want to get each one of them to make it easier for you to view. Okay, awesome. Now we have our file handler, the TS file. What this simply does, according to what we're reading, the name of the file contains the quote, right? That's the file name. And this function, what does it do? It gets the file name, right, which is the cost.json, and joins it. And it returns a path, right? That is simply what it does. It gets the file path. It gets this file name, and then it returns a path. It joins everything together to form like a path. Okay. We also have the read quote. So after you have gotten the file path, right, what do you now do? You now read the code. This function is available. The read file sync is available. It's a JavaScript function which is available from FS, right? From the module FS. And then we always use, according to documentation, you have the file path and then you have the UTF-8. Okay? And then you pass it as JSON data. And the reason why we have as quote is because it is a TypeScript function. And if you look at this code, you will realize here in your types that the interface has an ID, a text, author, and tags. So if you pass in any other thing, apart from, let's say we now have file. Let's say we're passing file from here. This quote, this one here, we're now passing file in your past JSON data. It won't take it. It will show you an error that file is not in the quote interface. And we always have this try catch functionality so that it can catch the error and return something instead of the code just messing up. Now, there is also a function called write code. This is where you pass in the codes and the file path, and then it gets the codes. What this is simply doing is just writing out the codes in that JSON format. That's all. And it adds it to our part, this part. Okay. So, like you have your 5 values now. If you do that functionality of writing, which we are still going to handle, you will see that we'll now have 6. That is simply what it means. That's simply what this code is doing. Okay. Now, we have our get codes by ID. Okay. What does this do? This is simply getting our codes based on the ID that we have passed. All right. And here we decide to add undefined just in case the code is not available. So you can also do this. Peradventure, you intend passing an undefined path later or something. You can have your quotes, or it could be an undefined in your types. I always advise to not use any, right? It is not good to use any as a type. It is best to have a defined interface. All right. So here we're getting our codes by running the read code, which we have here, which reads the file from the file path. It goes here. What it does is like, oh, okay, where is this file path? Oh, it is in quotes.json. And it goes there, opens it, and reads the file. It reads everything, and that is simply what is happening here. Okay, so it reads the code, and it checks for the ID. Okay, it checks for the ID based on the ID that you have passed here. And then it finds it in that array that we saw just now. Okay. It finds the ID based on that array and it returns that code. Don't worry, I'm explaining the code. We're going to still go to the Postman to check how it works, and then we'll explain the functionality as well. Now, to add the code, what we are doing is you have a code that you want to add. You know the file path already. And then what happens? Remember, we have this function called read code. We'll call the read code and we pass in the file path. And then if there is no ID, then you return false. Like if, let's assume you have a code of 5, you are passing in an object that has ID 5. Remember, we already have ID 5 in our array. In this array here, we already have ID 5. What this thing is simply saying is that if this code ID that we have here that we're passing is the same as this ID that we have here, you should not do anything. But if it is like ID 6, then what do? We push that code. That means we add it, we push it to code, and then we write the code. So now we have, remember the write code function we checked earlier? All right, this write code, it does what? It writes that file and puts it in this JSON. Okay, now let's go on to delete. It's almost the same process. So what it does is it checks for the quotes that you have. Remember, we are using this read quote often. So instead of repeating our code, imagine this read quote now, this one, we have the function already and we just call it so that it makes our code cleaner. Okay, so you read the quote, what you're simply doing here is getting the quote.json, getting all the things that are inside that quote. That's all. That's what this read quote is doing. So now, if you want to delete, what does it do? It first of all goes to read that quote and see, okay, what do we have in this quote.json file? And it gets, oh, okay, this is what we have. What we are now doing is, let us get the length of that particular array in the code.json. Remember, this is an array. This whole thing, this bracket is an array. Okay, so now it comes here and says, let's check for the length, and then it filters the ID that you are passing. And if it just goes and say, okay, maybe you are passing 7, it goes and check, is there any ID 7 in this array? If there's no ID 7, what happens? To just tell you nothing will happen, because that ID is not there. But if it is there, what happens? It simply deletes that ID. Okay, now let's go to get random quotes. Don't worry, we're going to take a look at the Postman, where we'll now be running it on our system. And I'm sure there is also a link that was shared where you can also do it on Postman in case you are not currently running it on your local. Okay, we will get there very soon. All right, so now that we have get random quotes, what does it do? Of course, we're passing the file path. Okay, if you have it, if not, passing undefined, like nothing. And then you get your quotes from the read quote function we talked about earlier. And if there is no quotes, let's assume you came here now and this whole thing was what? Deleted. Let's assume this whole thing is deleted. That's what this one means. That's what this thing means. If quote.length is equal to 0. So let's assume there is nothing. It will do what? It will return undefined. But if there's quotes, what happens? It just randomly gets any one of those objects in the array and then sends it to you. So now let's go to index.ts. Okay. Here we have all the endpoints that we will be calling. Please confirm you are on the index.ts file. Kindly confirm you're on the index.ts file. Please, in the chat session, confirm that you're on the index.ts file. Great. I can see some people on the chat session are responding to that. Very good. Very good. Now we may proceed. So in this index.ts file, remember we have some functions in the file handlers. All right. So here, this is simply doing what? It's like the entry. Remember, we talked about it. Is the entry of the app. Like when you have a node app, it first of all looks for your index.ts file. All right. And what is this doing? It is checking if you have an env file, something like this. .env. I just created it now. So that is what this thing is checking for. If you have a .env file, this process.env.port simply means if you have something like this, port equals, let's say, 3001. Okay, so this is simply what this thing is looking for. So if it doesn't find it, what does it do? If it finds it, it makes it into an integer. Make sure it is passed int, and then it gets your port, or it makes use of default 3000. And if you come here in your terminal and you run npm run dev, what does it do? It will tell you server running on port localhost 3000, because that is what you defined here. If you go ahead, all right, to change it, remember I didn't save this. If you go ahead to change this one to 3002, all right, let's save it. Let's clear this and let's run npm run dev again. You will realize that it will say what? It is running on 3002 because I changed it here. Okay? All right, so I'm going to change it back to 3000. That was just for explanation. Okay, so, all right. Now, then it calls create server function. And then it logs this thing. And that is why you have it here. So if for any reason I remove this console.log, let's see what will happen. All right, let's run our terminal again. What happens? You will see that it is not showing that documentation again. That's all those API endpoints, it wasn't showing it because of what? We have deleted this console.log here. All right. Okay, so very good. Now we have reverted it back, and so we can have it. Now, please confirm that you are still with me on index.ts file. All right, let's go to our server.ts. What do we have there? In our server.ts file, we simply have the things that have to do with the servers, basically. I'm reading a message on the chat session from Peter. Missing script. Have you run npm install before running npm run dev? You have to do that first if you haven't. Okay, moving on. Now, in our server.ts file, we have send response function. What does it do? It sets the header to application/JSON. It writes the header, and then it hands the response with a stringified JSON format. This is like the format, the JavaScript format. So just know it. This is how it is written, and this is how it should be done. If you do it in any other way, you might not get the response that you intend to get. Okay. Now, we have the pass request body function. What does it do? It gets the request, right? Remember that we have to pass in the type, and the type is an HTTP incoming message type. And we have a promise to chunk the data. Promise is like trying to make it an asynchronous request, like making sure, okay, everything gets together at the time it's supposed to do. Okay, and then once it is done, once you have the data, it collects the data that comes in, and then it processes the complete request. If it is successful, it resolves it as a pass body. If there's an error that happens, it rejects it and return invalid JSON. That is for the pass body request. Now let's go to another function we have, which is handle get all quotes. What this simply does is what? It gets the file handler, it reads the quotes. Remember this our file handler here. Okay. Remember our read quote that we did. So this file handler, let's look for it here. You will see that we have imported the file handler from this place. Okay. Then what did we do? We now got the read quote. Remember, read quote is in that file handler. Let's go there and check it again for those who are just joining. This is the read quote. It simply reads all the data in this quotes.json file. Okay. Now we have file handler.read quote. And once we have that, what do? We retrieve the quotes successfully. All right. That's simply what it's doing. Now, we have decided to break it down. It makes it easier for you when you have the function that handles all quotes. As you can see, handler for get/quotes. We'll come back here when we are taking a look at the Postman. Okay, so we also have handle get random quote. Remember that function in our file handler. Let's have a look at it. Get handler quote. So this get random quotes is a function in the file handler. All right. And once you run that, what happens? If there is no quote available, remember why this one will happen. This one will happen if the array, let's go back and check our get random quote. Get random quote has what? It checks if there is no quote length. That is, if in this JSON quote.json file, it is empty array. What happens? It returns undefined. Now that undefined is what we are checking here. If there is no quote, it simply return what? No quote is available. Can you see how the thing is syncing together? All right. But if there is a quote, what happens is what? It will retrieve that quote and say random quote retrieved successfully. I am reading a chat in the comment section. We are going to get to package.json, where I'm going to be showing you exactly what to check for when you are running your app. Okay, for this message is for the person that says their npm they are getting an error. So I'm going to respond to Peter now. Peter, I'm going to digress a bit, and we're going to see that go to your package.json and you will see this dev. It is npm run dev, not npm install -d dev. Okay, so this npm run dev is in the package.json file, and that is how you will run your application. Okay, let's go back to our server.ts file. Now we have handle get random quote. Okay, and we have been able to resolve how we did that. Okay, now let's go to handle get quote by ID. All right, what does it do? It gets the request and the response and the ID. And then, since we have the ID, it goes ahead to say, let us check the get quote by ID function, which is in the file handler. All right, and then if we click this, we will see what it does. What does it do? Gets the ID, it reads the quote, and it finds the ID. All right. After it gets the quote that we need, it checks, did it return anything? The reason why it is important to check this is because your code might not run. You have to tell the computer everything you need it to do. So it checks if there's a quote. If there's no quote, it just tells you, you know what, the quote, let's say we passed in 7, it will tell you quote with ID 7 was not found because it has checked for this JSON file and it sees that all we have there is to ID 5. We don't have 7. So instead of returning blank, it will get you this message and you will see a 404 response. Remember, 404 always means not found. Now, if there's a quote, what automatically happens is it runs this. The reason why we have this function, some people can do something like else, then you have this, right? Then you have something like this. Then you have something like this, okay? However, there is no need for that. Since we already have what? This return, okay? So that is why we are not putting any else, because you don't need it, okay? So it just comes here and say what? Let's check. Is there a quote? If there's no quote, it's simply return. Once this return is called, this second line will not run. Okay. So, but if this one is not, if there's a quote, then this one will not run at all because it is checking for quote. And once there is quote, it will not even bother running this one. It will just keep it and come to send response. All right. And then the message we decide to write is quote retrieved successfully. You can decide to write any type of message you want. All right. Now let's go to handle create quote. What does this handler, what does it do? It gets the request and response. Remember, it's an asynchronous process and we're getting the promise. So we have, and in an asynchronous process, you have to wait. So it's like, you're like, you know what? Let's like have like a queue. You have to wait. Once one process is done, then it moves to the next one. On a queue, remember, if you're attending to a customer, you have to finish one customer before you attend to the next one, okay? And that simply means you have to what? Get the first request, which is pass request body. Await means simply wait for it to finish. So you have to get the function we wait until there's a body, until this one returns the response before it goes on to here. And the reason is because if we don't wait for it, this text we will not see anything because there will be no body. So that's why we have to wait for body to be completed, to have a body, right? And then we can then do what? Check if there's a text in the body and if there's author in the body. Remember, we are trying to create a quote. Let's go and check our quote and see. Can you see? We have text, we have author, we have tags. All right. Now here, we're saying that if you are passing quote into this handler, you must have text and author. We're not making it compulsory for you to have tags. That's simply what it means. If you want it to have tag, all you have to do is just what? Do body.tags. Like when there's no author in the body, or when there's this means all. So when there's no author in the body, when there's no or when there's no text in the body, or when there's no tag in the body, right? And then of course you have to come here and say quote must have text, author, and tags, right? Okay, but we're not making it compulsory, but this is just for the context so you can understand better. All right, so now we have this, and what do we do? Once you understand that this person has text and author, we then do what? We generate a new ID. Okay, now remember, how do you generate a new ID? you first of all go and check your read code. Then you look for the maximum ID. This is what this one is doing. One, you will realize that we are naming the function based on what the functionality is. Imagine if I name this one just ID. How would you have known what it is doing? So it is always good to name it based on what it is doing. So anybody looking at your code will automatically understand what you are working on. All right. So what is max ID? Right? It is simply, we are making use of the reduce function. Reduce function is in JavaScript. You can go ahead and read about reduce. Right? So what it simply does is it gets the value and then the quote, and then it checks for that ID, and it checks if the ID is greater than the maximum length of that ID. Remember, we have quotes, right? We have an array. So it's going to check, okay, what is the maximum ID that we have in the quote handler, so that it can join it. You know, if you are creating a new one now, it will not be nice if it creates, after we have ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, and then want to create a new one, and then we are now having ID 1 again, or ID 150. You know, it's going to look weird. So that is what this thing is doing here. It checks for the maximum ID we currently have, and then it adds one more value to it. All right. Remember that this is a string. Okay. Pass int is changing it to what? An integer that we can make use of. You can add an ID. You can add a string to an ID, to a number. So if you are adding, let's say you have 4 plus 1. It is not the same as when you're adding 4 plus 1. So what we are trying to do here is what? We want this 4, okay? Or let me use 5 for being explicit, right? Let me use 5, which is the last ID that we have in our quote.json. 5 is the last one. So here we did what? We cannot have this, and that is why we have this ID 5. We passed the int to become an integer, to be something like this, and then once we have it, we now made use of it here by adding 1. So this is something like this here. And then once we have it, what we do, we convert it back to string. So we now have equals 6, right? Equals 6. We now say this 6, so convert it back from this format to this format. That is simply what this is doing. Okay? All right. Now, once we have that, remember, this is the object we are trying to add to that array. We're trying to add another object. We're trying to add something like this. Something like this here. Okay. All right. So we have the text. We have the text, which we can get from body, right? Okay. And then we have, remember, we passed in the body here. Don't forget we passed in the body. So we got the text from the body. We got the author from the body. And then remember that we don't have a check for tags. So should in case there is no tag in the body, what happens? Just put an empty array. I'm reading a comment that says I should zoom in, so I will try to zoom in more. Okay. You can always follow it on your laptop. I will advise you follow it on your laptop and just listen to me and check your own code base so you can follow along. This is why it was sent to you, to have it on your system. So even if you cannot see my screen, you can simply just follow on your laptop. Okay. There's a limit to what I can zoom because we need to check what we have before and what we have after. All right. Now, what happens? After we have gotten our new codes, we now decide to call the function add code that we have in our file handler. We call the add code and we pass in this new code that we already have, this new function code that creates an object, that has an object. We pass it here. And if there is an issue and this code was not created, what happens? It returns status 500 and message failed to create code. Okay? And if it is successful, what happens? It returns a status code of 201 and it gets code created successfully. That's the message it will return. And then it will have an other key, which is data. And it will be what? The new code that we have above here. Okay. But if there's an error in between, for any reason, we have said I should what? Send response. Okay. And it send the response with a status code of 400 with a message invalid request body. You can update the message to say error. You can update the message to say anything you want it. You can even just say invalid request and it will return that in your Postman. Okay. Now, in 1 minute, we will be having our attendance. So, at this point, let us take this handle update codes and then we can have our attendance. Okay. So we have a request, response, and ID because it's an update function. And then what do? It check if there's an existing code with that ID. It goes to look for this code just and say, do we have this ID available? And then if we have the ID available, what does it do? It simply just what? Says what? There's no code with that ID. If not, what does it do? It updates that code. So let's assume I have ID 5 now, and in my text, I want to change this one to it seems impossible, right? I've removed that all. It will check it and use the new value which I am passing and then update it to form this. We will come back to that after the attendance class. Okay. So it is time for attendance. It's 8 p.m. We will continue from here after the attendance. From here, we're going to check all the rest of the remaining. We're almost done with the preview of the files. And then we will now take a look at our Postman after the attendance. Thank you. You can go ahead and take your attendance now. Okay, welcome back to the second part of the class. And in this second part, we will be talking about the continuation of our functions, yeah? And here we're going to be talking, we talked about the update code, right? Where we get the code, we'll check if the ID exists before, then we update it, right? And then what happens? If we cannot update the code, it says failed. If we update the code, it says updated successfully. If for any reason there is an error, it says invalid request body. Now let's go to the delete function handler. Here, we're dealing with code/id. And what does it do? It checks for the request, which is the incoming message, the response, which is the server response. It also needs the ID of the code that you want to delete. All right. So this existing code, what does it do? It goes to the file handler and checks for the function called getCodeById and passes that ID that you want. Okay? Now, if there's that ID, if there's that code, if there's a code that has that ID in this JSON file, right, it moves down and deletes it. But if peradventure you put ID 7, and we know that in our JSON file, current ID, the last one we have here is 5. Obviously, we're going to get something like 404. Code with ID not found. It is important to use the correct status code because it can be very confusing. Imagine if you put status 200 here. 200 means success. But this is not a successful response, isn't it? And it's going to be confusing, especially when other people are now handling the code. But we all know that 404 means not found. So once you put a 404, even if you don't see any message, you already understand that it means that that thing is not existing at that particular place you're looking for it. Okay, so now you have the delete code function. Since you have checked and the ID exists, let's say we are picking ID 1. All right, then we delete the code. Okay, and then if the delete is not successful, right, it says what? Failed to delete code. If not, if it's successful, it says the code with ID. We decided to pass the parameter of that ID so that you can know the particular ID you deleted. It's a very good way of writing your code to make it easier for people who are not aware of what you have written but are using it. Okay, now we have the handle requests. This handle request handler, what does it specifically do? It is based on it gets the method, it sets the header. All right, it sets this method, it allows all origin, it sets header to allow get, post, put, delete options, right? And then it also set the content type header to allow all type of headers. Then it handles pre-flight request as well. If you go to your browser, maybe on a page, you will realize that we have something like XHR, and when we have all other things, right? So this thing simply just helps your application to run well when you are using it on a web application. You know, this is a backend API that you're going to use on your front end. Exactly. All right. So then what do? We have a base URL, okay, where we get the host from the request.headers. And then we have the URL. You construct another URL. If you have a URL in your request, you use it, or you resort to your base URL. Okay. Then we have our path name, which is what? This new URL, we always give something in it that has path name as part of the values that it will return. Okay. All right. Now, at that point, we now have a check. This part is trying to ensure that we do the right thing and we call the correct function. Remember all the functions that we have talked about before. Now we have undo get all quotes. Now, so if the path name is slash quote, remember where we are getting the path name from. We're getting it from the URL. Okay. So if it is quote, what does it do? It calls the undo get all quote function. All right. And if the path name is slash random, it goes ahead to call that function that we have already written, undo get random quotes function. And if the path looks like or matches quotes with something at the back that looks like an ID, this is regex. Regex is like, it's telling you a format. It's a kind of format that, okay, if you have something in a format of quote slash something at the back, like in form of an ID, right? What do? Get the ID from the path name. So this is like, get the path name, split at the point where you have a slash. So let's say we have HTTP. Yeah. So what it's saying here is split the one that has what? After the code. Remember the path name is quote. It doesn't have all this one in between. It just has something like this. So split the path name of quote and what after it, pop it out. So what is after the slash? So it's saying split the slash, okay, which is this, and then what? Get this value out for me. And then pass this ID into the undo get quote by ID. All right. Are we all following? Please respond yes in the chat session so I can know we are all following. Okay. Now, so if there is none of this kind of paths, what does it mean? It should return what? The route is not found. Remember, it first of all check if it is a get method. So if it's get method, then it checks for the kind of path name that it has. We are going to try to test this thing very soon so we can see the functionality of all these things. Okay, so now, what if it is a post request? That's why we use else if. Okay, if it's a post request and the path name is quotes, because it is only one post request that we are having. Remember here, right here, we only have one post request, but we have 3 get requests. That's why we have if and then another condition inside. But for this one, we have just one post method. And then what happens? That was why we just use and path name. We don't have to use another if inside because it is just one thing we're talking about. So, and we only have one path, which is what? Slash quotes. And that's why we say and path name is equal to quotes. Await handle create quotes, which is that handler we have talked about before. Okay. Then we're now going to check what if it is a put method. Check if the path name matches quote slash ID. Remember we discussed how this regex function works. It checks for quote slash ID. All right. Now, once it gets the ID, what does it do? It awaits handle update code. Now, what else if what happens? It checks if the request method is delete and get the path name, the path ID, and checks that, okay, is it a delete function? Okay, yes, it is a delete function. Does it have this kind of format? Oh, yes, it does have. Okay, what is the next step? It runs the handler to delete code. And if we don't find anything like that, it checks for a get request, it checks for post, it checks for put, it checks for delete, and it still cannot find anything like that. What should it do? It should return status of 404, route not found. And if there's an error happening, maybe somewhere you have put a comma or something that is disrupting the code, what happens? It shows what? Internal server error. All right. Now, we have, remember this function, create server, that we saw in our index.ts file. Let's go back to our index.ts file so I can show you again. See, create server, and it passes in that port. All right. So here in our server.ts file, it runs the create server and then manages the handle request. Remember, the handle request is what? This one that we just talked about. Okay. Now, can you see the handshake? And what does it do? It tells you, you know what, server is listening on and running on port, like it's doing here. Server is running on port this. And then it does what? Return server. Okay. Now that we have this, let's check our types. Remember, we have our code type, and then we have our API response. Your type is always following the kind of format that you're expected to have. Your API responses all have status code, they all have messages, but some of them don't have data, and that is why you have this optional chaining. So when you use this, it simply means that if it is not available, it is fine. Can you see that we use any here? However, you can decide to create another interface that handles the data. Okay, if you know the kind of data structure that you are expecting. All right. Now, here at this point, I created this one earlier, so I'm just going to delete it. It's not part of the code and we don't need it. We'll just make use of our default 3000 port. Okay. Now, of course, our gitignore has the node module and the disk. We don't need it. Once you install, it automatically populates itself. And then we have the package lock.json, which locks the version of the things that you have installed. It locks that version for consistency's sake. Okay, so that if in case you want to install again, it just picks the version from here, and then once you are running npm install, it just automatically picks this version and then run it. You don't have to do any other thing. But in case maybe your version is outdated or sometimes you might need to delete this log file. But do not delete your package.json file. It is very important. All right. Your system looks at package.json. It gets the main. Can you see here in main? It gets the index.js file. All right. And then that is what it's running. And this index.js file, remember, is this is like a compressed functionality of the old app that you have. It has binded it and put it in like in a folder that it only understands. Okay, so now can you see that the disk already have file handler, index server? So it already put all the things that it knows you are working with in its own way that it will understand it. All right, like it has interpreted your folder into the way he understands it, and then you know that, okay, the main thing you are dealing with package.json is go to this and look for the index.js file there. All right. And then going to what the issue someone was having, you will realize that when you have a project, once you read your readme.md file, the next thing you should check is your package.json. That is what will tell you how to run it. In case your dev is not working, you can also use start. All right. So you can see here that they're both calling the same thing. All right. So you can run npm run start or npm run dev based on the script that we have here. What it's doing is node is telling node, hey node, go to the index.js file in your node and run it for me. Or if you use your dev command, which is npm run dev, what it means, this thing means for this build, it means you will run something like npm run build in your terminal. While this one simply means npm run start, and this one simply means what? npm run dev. All right. So anytime you see your script, this is what it means. So we ran our npm run dev to get this. Some might need to run npm run start depending on what works for you based on your computer configuration and your terminal configuration. So now you can also run npm run build if you want to build it and then host it. Okay. All right. Now we are going to the next thing, which is what? The test. Most of the time, it is always good to write a text for your application. When you write a test, it helps you to be able to check it and see that, oh, okay, what is this supposed to do? Right? And we run a test here, which does what? In the make request function, we wrote a test for make request. We wrote a test for run test here. Can you see run test? All right. Okay. So, and here we have get all requests. So what is happening? Run test is what? Is running make request, get quotes, is running make request, get quote slash random. It's calling make request, right? And this is our make request right up here. So let's go to our make request and see what we have. We have the options, which has the host name, the post, the path, the method, and the header. And then we have our request functionality, right? We simply like we have it in our former file, right? Where we have the response on response, get the data and then chunk it, add the data, like get all the data together, right? That means you have an array, so get all of them and make sure we have an array of all the data that we need. And then once you are done with that, pass that value and then make it into a JSON stringified data. And because that is what the that is the style that your output understands. So that is why you have to stringify the JSON format. Okay. And then pass the data that you already have. Okay. And so it's like we're writing a test, but in another different format. Can you see it is test.js file? Okay. And then we can do what? Get, of course, here we have quote ID where we can always await the make request. And then we can also run a test to create a new request and then update just to ensure that our code is working correctly. All right. So in doing that, we are going to go to the next format, which is what? To check what we have been studying so far. Now let's come to our Postman. I'm sure we all have Postman right now on our system. We all have Postman. Okay, this is my own Postman. Now, we are going to start with the quotes. We are going to start with the quotes. Okay? Now for the get quotes, let's go back to this place where we have the get quotes. In the get quote, what do we have? Handle requests. All right, the get functionality. So let's go to quotes. So here we have what? Slash quotes. Okay, so in the slash quotes, which we have here, we have handle get all quotes. And this says code successfully retrieved and retrieves all our codes. See, it says code retrieved successfully, and this is the data. If for any reason I come back here and say what? Successful. I've removed the codes there. Successful. Now let's try to run it again. We have to start our server again. And then, what do we have? Successful. Okay. Yes, you can also use Hotchscotch on your browser. Yes. Very good. You can use any one of them. They are both the same thing. It's just a medium of calling your endpoint. You can use anything. In fact, there are a lot of things out there that you can use. Postman, Hotchscotch, and so many things. Okay. Now, can you see that our message changed? But we didn't change any other thing. So just in case, and then look at our data. If you do not return data here, let's say you decide not to put data, what happens? Let's see. What will happen if we remove data? Can you see? It just says successfully. There's no data because you did not pass it. So I'm doing this in case you're trying it on your own and you see that some things are not working fine. You need to check back to your function and check what you are doing wrong. Okay, now what is the next endpoint that we're going to check? It is the get code slash random. Okay, remember this check that we have earlier. I think we need to go through that now, which is we have a check in our handler that says route not found. So what are we going to do to achieve this? What we can do is to say quote and unquote. Can you see that when I used quotes and unquote, what does it do? It gives me what? Route not found. Okay. That is what it simply brings to me. Route not found. Okay. Now, let us go. So now you see the essence of this else here. So it has already checked for quotes. It checks for this, it checked for this, and it didn't see anything that looked like it. And that was why it gave you the route not found. But if you do not add it, let's assume you just remove this else, you are not going to see this response. You will just be in hanging. And that is why it is important to always tell the system what to do and what to expect. I am reading the chat message from Ubong. This is not a slide. I would like to say that this is not a slide. This is the folder that we're working with, and we're currently checking out the endpoints that we have already discussed, the functions. So now we're taking a look at the endpoint and seeing how we can make good use of the functions that we have written. and how they are connected together. That's what we're doing now. So it is not a slide, it is on your laptop. If you have gotten that folder and you have done the necessary npm install and you're running it on your app, you can do what I'm doing concurrently. Okay, now that we have done this and we see that it shows our route not found, let's go back to the second one, which is code/random. Okay, now let's do code/random. Okay, and then click what? Send. What does it do? It randomly gets our code. So let's go back and see. This is handle get random codes. Okay, so let's go to this function and see what is happening there. Remember, we checked, it gets the random codes. It sees if there is no random codes, then it says what? No codes available. So now we want to see how to get this one, right? So what we will do is, let's go to our code and let's remove all these codes. Let's just remove it. Let's just remove it and just put an empty array. Now let's try to run our random code again. Can you see? No codes available. Why? Because we have already removed all the what? All the codes in the codes.json file. Okay. Now, all right. And if we do it back and we run it, what happens? Can you see that now that I ran it again, what happened? It shows me ID 3. If I run it again, to show me another ID. If I run it again, it will show me 4. And it's showing me based on any ID it decides to choose, because we ran the random function. And remember, the get random code, what does it do? It checks if the code length is equal to 0. If it's equal to 0, it's not undefined, and that's why we have that value. If not, it just picks a random length, right? Based on the length of the quote that you have. Quote.length is picking the length of that array. So it will not pick a value greater than that length. It won't pick, it won't go and be looking for 7. Because you have already done that random text to check for this length here. Okay, now we have successfully gotten our code/random. Okay, now let's try to get our code/id. So how do we do that? Let's pass in 7. I like starting with error so you can see the difference. Remember, in our array we don't have ID 7. Okay, so let's just try to run it and see. What does it say? Quote with ID 7 not found. This is because we did this, we wrote this. So if I remove this param ID here, and I come here and I rerun my server, I have to restart my server so that all the changes I made can be implemented. So now if I come back here and run it, what happens? Code with ID not found. Can you see that the 7 is no more there? But the best practice is to what? And can you see status here? It has 404 not found. If I come back here and I change this status code to 200, and then I restart my server, and I come here, can you see it becomes 200 okay? But it is not okay, because 200 is a standard response for successful HTTP requests. And this response is not successful because the ID that I'm passing does not exist. So why is it giving me 200? Can you see why it is important to put the right status code and then put in the ID? So anybody seeing this response would what? Would follow through and completely understand what the implementation is all about. Now I've made the changes, I have reverted it back, and then we have code with ID 7 not found. Okay, let's assume we now want to try code with ID 2. What do you do? And then we run it. What happens? It says code retrieved successfully, and then it gives us that data based on what? The ID that we have passed in. Now let's try to take a look. Is it correct? Let's go. Let's check. ID2. You see? Text, the only way to do great is to love what you do. Who is the author? Steve Jobs. And what is the tag? It's tagged for work and passion. Okay? And that's exactly what we have here. All right. Moving on to the next endpoint. What do we have here? We have postcodes. This is an interesting one. Before we go to postcode, I would like us to try a check. A check. Let us try a check here. There's a check here that says if the method is not get, post, put, or delete, what happens? What should it do? It should return route not found. Am I correct? Okay. So this is important. This is important because you are making sure that, look, if we do this now, we see that we have so many other options here. We have get, post, put, patch, delete, head options. Now in our code, we don't have patch, right? We don't have the option to cater for patch. We did not do that here. So let's try to see if we do patch, what happens? This is patch. All right. Now let's try to do this. Can you see? It shows route not found. Let us change it to method not accepted. Okay? And see to be sure that it is exactly calling that particular place. Okay? So let's see. What do we have here? Can you see? Method not accepted. That is to show you that it is looking for patch method. And then what happens? It says method not accepted. Remember when we did the route that wasn't existing, where we put quotes and unquote? Remember, we already checked that one as well to see that, okay, if this route is not there because we have quotes and unquotes, what did it do? You know, it also gave us that error as well, exactly, because we did a check for it. Okay, now that we have that, okay, let us go back to our post method now, right? Remember, this is where you change your method to post, and you don't need an ID for it. See how the path is supposed to be, /code. This is how it's supposed to be. Now, if you try to run it, what will happen? Can you see? Remember in that function, let's go back and check it. We have undo create posts. What happens there? It checks if there's a text and author in the body. All right. Now, this is the body. Okay? Now we have what? Text as what? We have text as what? Let's choose a text. Let's choose a text based on what we have here. All right, we have this. Let's do redefine what is possible. Okay. Now the author is what? Let me choose somebody from the chat session. Okay, let me choose the last person. Let me choose Opeyemi as the author. So we have what? Adebanjo Opeyemi. Okay. Now, what else do we need to add? Now we're going to do two instances. The first instance is we're not going to add tag. Remember, we can do it without adding tag. What happens if you don't add tag? It automatically creates an empty array. Let's try it. Let's try it. Because I added a comma here, which was an error, that was why it gave that invalid. But now looking at it, can you see what happens? What did it do? It created it and gave it an ID 6. Look at it here. This is where it does it. Can you see? Remember when we talked about that maximum ID? He checked for the maximum ID in the array, realized it was 5, converted it to an integer, added 1 to it, and converted it back to string. And that is why we could have 6 in a string here. All right. And then it gets the text from the body that we have passed in, which is this body, right? It gets the text, it gets the author. And since we did not put a tag, what happened? It automatically just gives us an empty array. Good. Now, what if we now want to put a tag? What if we have done it and we're like, oh man, I reached out to Adebanjo and he told me the tags that are related to this text. It's like, oh, it's about wisdom. Let's use wisdom. Or what are the tags we can use? Passion, right? Wisdom and passion. It's like, oh no, please, it is wisdom and passion. Oh, okay. What can we do? Or wise words. What can we do? We can now come here and say tags. Okay, no problem, Adebanjo, we'll add it. Okay, we now have something like this, right? And then it's an array of strings. So we come here and do wise word. And what? Passion. All right. And then, how do we update? We will not use the post method this time around. We will use the word put. Okay. And then we're like, okay, what's the ID that we want to change? Oh, it's the ID 6. And that is why we have the put method to update that code, right? And we have the put method ID. We just put what? The 6 at the back. Now let's try to run it. Before we run it, let's go to our code handler and see. Can you see that we have it here already? Before we run that put method, it has already written it in the file, updated the file, and added our 6 to it automatically. Now we can now come back here and what? Add the put method and say, you know what? We want to update this thing. Adebanjo just told us what we need, the tags that we need now. So let's do it this way. Okay. All I have to do is just come here and do what? Send. What happens? Now we have tag, wise word, and passion. And we're like, oh, okay, let's go back and check our JSON and see. Can you see? It has automatically updated it with wise word and passion tags. We can also say that, oh, no, we don't want wise word. We want it to be like Johnny. No, it's Johnny. I changed my mind. It's Johnny. Just come here, update it, and then voila. And we have Johnny and passion as our tags. That's beautiful. Now let's go to the last one, which is the what? The delete method. You see, in this delete method, it is a very, very sensitive endpoint, especially the one that will automatically just remove data from your system. You have to be very careful. You have to put on your spectacles and look at it properly, because it can cost you a lot of things if you delete what you're not supposed to delete. All right. Now, for this delete method, what happens? We change our method to delete, right? Remember that this delete here has the same path as the put. So you don't need to do anything on this part anymore, right? All you just have to do is what? Voila, run the delete. Okay, so now we can decide to go ahead and delete number 6 back. And it says what? Quote with ID 6, deleted successfully. If we come back here, we see that code 6 does not exist anymore in our quotes.json file. And now that is pretty everything about basic API functionalities. With this, you can do a lot, right? I know this is also hosted on how many of us has where it is hosted on? I know it is hosted somewhere. I know it is hosted somewhere. Let me see. We have https colon slash slash DSA basic API. So you can also run this on your application in case your app is not working as expected. I think I'm correct. Oh, awesome. Yeah. So this is the endpoint that has been hosted for you. And then you can always just come here to check in case your app is not running properly. So you just copy this endpoint, just type this endpoint on your own system, and then you can see it hosted. And then on your local, you can as well still run it as well and make the changes. You can improve on it, make it better, think of great inspiration, and you can even share it with us in your next class, what you did and how you did it, and what the outcome was in your WhatsApp group. I'm sure a lot of things can be built on this thing that can inspire you, which you can be running on your system and just get inspired. You can do so many things with this, because this is a lovely basic. And with this, we come to the end of the backend development and APIs class 2. Do you have any questions? You can also create codes with the hosted API. You can add more codes to it. Even with this one, you can do let's do posts. Can you see? Let's do the post that we did here. So I'll just copy what we have here now. All right, we'll copy what we have here. Come here, click on body, change it to raw text, change it to JSON, and then just paste what we have here. Hold on. Okay, and then if you send it now, you will see that, can you see, it has been updated even on that hosted one. Okay, now I'll be reading some questions. How do we get the source code? Edit. You can get the source code. It is in that file that was shared with you. It is in that file folder that was shared with you. So just download the zip folder and extract it and open it on your Visual Studio Code, just like I did here. Then the next thing to do is to go to your package.json and see what to follow, what to run, which is either npm run dev or npm run start. And then to install, what do? You go to your terminal, open a new terminal, and what? npm install. And then it can run on your local. You can make your changes, and voila. Okay, I'm gonna give 1 more minute for any questions so far. Just go ahead and play around with it and see what you come up with. Okay. And with this, we come to the end of today's class. Thank you everyone for joining. Do have a lovely day. Bye bye.